In 1886, Friedrich Nietzsche wrote a line that many people quote without understanding. He said that man is something to be overcome, not comforted, not accepted as he is. Overcome. He wasn't talking about muscles, money, or status. He was describing a psychology, a particular internal architecture that separates the rare, elite few from everyone else who simply exists, comfortable and unremarkable, until they die. This is a video about that architecture, about what Nietzsche believed actually happens inside the mind of someone who becomes great, and why almost no one is willing to pay the price it demands. Let's start with what greatness is not. It is not talent. Nietzsche had little patience for the idea that some people are simply born special and the rest of us are excused from trying. He believed talent without discipline rots. It's the raw material, not the finished work. It is not popularity. In fact, Nietzsche believed the opposite was often true, that being loved by the crowd is usually evidence that you have not yet said or done anything that actually mattered, because the crowd only applauds what it already agrees with. And it is not comfort. This is the one people resist the most. Nietzsche believed that a comfortable life and a great life are, structurally, almost incompatible. Comfort optimizes for the absence of pain. Greatness requires the pursuit of resistance. So if greatness isn't talent, popularity, or comfort, what is it? Nietzsche's answer begins with a concept he called the will to power. Not power over other people, power over yourself. The elite mind, in Nietzsche's view, is defined by an internal drive to grow, to expand, to overcome its own limitations again and again, without ever settling into a final, comfortable version of itself. Most people reach a plateau in their 20s or 30s and simply stop. They find a stable identity, a stable set of beliefs, a stable routine, and they spend the rest of their life defending that stability rather than exceeding it. Nietzsche saw this as a kind of quiet death that happens decades before the real one. The elite psychology refuses the plateau. It treats every version of itself as temporary, a draft, not a final copy. This leads to the first real trait of Nietzsche's elite mind, a hostile relationship with comfort. Nietzsche believed that suffering, difficulty, and resistance are not obstacles to a great life. They are the material a great life is built from. He wrote that what does not kill him makes him stronger. And while the phrase has become a cliché printed on gym walls, the actual philosophy behind it is far more demanding than people realize. He wasn't saying pain is good. He was saying that avoiding all pain guarantees you will remain small. The elite mind doesn't chase suffering for its own sake. It simply refuses to organize its life around avoiding it. It walks toward the difficult conversation, the frightening decision, the humiliating failure, because it understands that growth and comfort draw from the same limited well, and you cannot fill both at once. The second trait is what Nietzsche called self-legislation, the ability to create and obey your own law rather than borrowing one from the crowd. Most people are governed by external validation. Their sense of whether they're doing well is calculated by glancing outward at approval, at applause, at comparison to others. Nietzsche believed this is a form of psychological slavery, however comfortable it feels. The elite mind builds an internal standard instead. It knows, privately, exactly what a disciplined day looks like, exactly what mediocrity looks like, exactly what excellence demands, and it holds itself to that standard whether anyone is watching or not. This is why Nietzsche admired what he called the sovereign individual, someone whose word to himself is a promise he actually keeps, independent of outside pressure. This single trait, more than any other, explains why elite performers in any field, art, business, sport, science, tend to look almost boring from the outside. Their greatness isn't performed for an audience. It's enforced privately in the hours nobody sees. The third trait is the capacity to endure solitude. Nietzsche lived this one personally, almost to an extreme. For most of his adult life, he had no permanent home, no stable career, no wife, few close friends who truly understood his work while he was alive. He wandered across Europe, riding in goose houses, often in physical pain, almost entirely unread by the public of his time. He came to believe this wasn't simply an unfortunate biography. It was close to a requirement. Elite thinking, elite creation, elite ambition all demand long stretches of time spent apart from the herd's opinion, because the herd's opinion is calibrated to protect the herd's comfort, not to produce anything extraordinary. Most people cannot tolerate this. The silence of being unappreciated, misunderstood, or simply alone with an unfinished and proven idea is unbearable for most minds. So they seek reassurance, they seek company, they seek approval, and in doing so, they quietly hand editorial control of their ambitions to people who never had to live with the consequences of those ambitions. The elite mind tolerates the discomfort of being alone with its own unfinished greatness for longer than anyone else is willing to. The fourth trait is the reinterpretation of failure. For most people, failure is evidence. It's proof that they were wrong to try, wrong to believe in themselves, wrong to take the risk in the first place. Failure closes a door, and the ordinary mind quietly agrees to leave it shut. Nietzsche saw failure completely differently, as information, not verdict. He believed the elite mind treats every collapse as material for the next attempt, rather than as a final judgment on its worth. This is closely tied to his idea of amor fati, the love of one's fate. Not resignation to what happens, but a fierce, active embrace of even the worst events as necessary raw material for whoever you are about to become. This is psychologically demanding in a way that's easy to underestimate. It requires refusing the easy, comforting story that failure tells, "I am not capable," and replacing it with a harder, more useful one. This particular attempt was not yet capable, and I am not finished. The fifth trait, and perhaps the rarest, is the refusal to seek permission. Nietzsche noticed that most people, even talented ones, spend enormous amounts of energy waiting to be chosen, waiting to be validated, waiting for someone with authority to confirm that their ambition is legitimate before they allow themselves to fully commit to it. The elite mind doesn't wait. It doesn't need an institution, a title, or a crowd's approval to begin taking itself seriously. Nietzsche himself wrote most of his major works without any real academic recognition, self-funding some of his own publications, addressing an audience that, for the most part, didn't yet exist. He famously said some men are born posthumously, meaning their real audience, their real recognition, would only arrive long after they were gone, and he chose to keep working anyway. This is the psychological core of what separates the elite from everyone else. Not superior genetics, not luck, a specific, repeatable set of internal decisions. To seek resistance instead of comfort, to obey a private standard instead of public approval, to tolerate solitude, to metabolize failure into fuel, and to act without waiting for anyone's permission. None of this is comfortable. None of it is quick. And Nietzsche never suggested that most people should, or even could, live this way. He wasn't writing a self-help manual for the masses. He was describing an exception, a possibility available to those willing to pay a price that most people, quite reasonably, are not willing to pay. But here's the question worth sitting with, the one Nietzsche seemed to leave for anyone paying close enough attention. If greatness isn't inherited, and it isn't luck, and it isn't granted by anyone else's approval, if it's simply a set of decisions repeated daily, under resistance, without an audience, then the only real obstacle standing between an ordinary life and an elite one is not circumstance. It's whether you are willing to become the kind of person who makes those decisions when no one is watching, and no one is applauding, and no one has promised you it will work. Nietzsche never promised it would work either. He only promised that the alternative, a comfortable, borrowed, unexamined life, guarantees it never will.